admit that 1967 made your hair stand up. Where were you when the riot started?
I was in Detroit.
What do you remember? What do you remember about it?
I remember how it started. I remember leading up to it. Detroit was like a powder keg. The hostility between the blacks and the police department is indescribable. At that time, Detroit was bringing in uneducated cops from Georgia, Mississippi, and Alabama, and with them all their Jim Crow ways. It was frightening to be a black kid in Detroit.
And to see a cop, I guess.
Especially a hillbilly cop, as we called them. These guys hated us, and they would call you a nigger in a second. I'm not sure the date, but I know it was late July, and it was a hot summer. The whole summer was hot. You just knew. People have been warning about that. It's going to happen. But anyway, we got down there near 12th, and there was thousands of people down there, and the cops had it blocked off. Cops weren't doing anything. They were so badly outnumbered, they said, just leave it alone. These people were looting their own neighborhoods. People were coming down off other hoods, and it just exploded. The National Guard, the airborne were there. If you were white, and there were some people driving by us in their cars, as it spread, boy, I mean, they were getting hurt. It was a bad, bad scene, and it made me sick. And I just got to the point where I just couldn't handle this anymore. I wanted to try. I'd been up to Toronto a couple times when I boxed. That's where I got the name in 1963. When I came up here, Sully Sullivan saw me and said, "You fight like a guy named Spider Webb out of Chicago." So he started calling me Spider. So I remember Toronto, and I remember how the people got along. You know, they got along. The racists didn't have this kind of, I mean, you saw people mingle. And all the time I was in Detroit, I didn't mingle with whites or with Latinos. It was just the brothers. So we went down 2 days later and tried to get across the border, and we couldn't. There were militia, state troopers, guards, I mean, cops everywhere. A couple days later, I got back to Windsor, and finally got across the border, and I stayed in Windsor a couple days. I had this gun. It was a .32 revolver. I took it and I threw it in the Detroit River. I had enough of violence. I just had enough of that kind of stuff. I had $3 and something in my pocket, and maybe a bag of clothes, blue jeans, and things like that, and I hitchhiked to Toronto.
When you say you didn't like the violence in Detroit, is boxing violence to you?
But it's controlled violence. To me, it's controlled. It's different than stabbing a guy, shooting a person, gang banging people. That's uncontrolled violence. Boxing is by consent. Nobody forced me into the ring. I did that on my own.
And you did really well.
I didn't make any money. I did well as an amateur. It taught me a lot about self-discipline. You don't win Golden Gloves or any boxing tournaments at any level without self-discipline.
You never did turn pro, though. How come?
Well, first of all, I had bad hands. My hands, after fights, sometimes my hands would feel like a toothache. And see, for a guy that my size, I have, your hands are probably bigger than mine.
I don't think so.
Close to, well, you got small hands too. But my hands, as you can see, they're small.
Let's talk about some of the big guys that most people would be terrified to be in a ring with. George Chuvalo, Muhammad Ali. How'd you meet George?
I met George in 1963 at the Motor City Gym in Detroit. I introduced myself, and he was the same guy that was training him and been working with me, Teddy McWhorter. So we hit it right off. George and I hit it from then, and he was like a big brother to me. I love him. But it's not easy to be in the ring with him.
How about Muhammad Ali?
I met him in 1965 when I was one of my stints here in Toronto. He trained out of the same gym as I did, Sully Sullivan's gym. His hands was like a blur. I'd never seen a heavyweight that fast. And he just, one thing I found about him in the ring, he was compassionate though. He knew what he could do and he didn't do it. And he actually even allowed me to back him into the ropes after. They said 10 seconds left in this particular round, and he said, back me up, and I'm hammering to the body and the hammer, and he's backing up, and then the bell rings, we slap gloves like this, you know, like I did something. The crowd, everybody was clapping. There was about 600 people in the gym. Every day he was there. And the next day in the paper they said that Spider Jones looked pretty good against Ali. It was a nice, but that's only because Ali allowed it to happen.
When you see this come, just sit down and come back up throwing your jab. Duck and throw your jab.
Okay.
Duck, throw your jab.
Boy, you
keep that right hand up.
Coordinated.
You do.
Yeah.
You're coordinated.
I don't
Okay, watch this now. Keep your right hand up. Okay, when I say duck, come up to it. Duck. Ouch! She hit me.
How many times have you been in jail?
Probably about 5 or 6 times. First time, actually I was 14 years old, and I kept getting in trouble. Youth detention centers for probation. And then one time, I remember being locked in the Windsor jail, the Sandwich jail, in isolation. I was 14 years old for breaking into cars and robbing. That's how it started, robbing. I tell you what, ain't nothing cool about people putting you to bed at night, waking you up in the morning, telling you what you're going to wear, what you're going to eat, what you're going to watch. That's not cool. I tell all the guys in jail, you're the fools.
Did you have a moment? Did you have a realization? This was not a way of life that you could feel proud of?
When I was in jail for the last time, I remember I'll be honest with you, when the judge gave me 2 years, when that door closed on me, I cried like a baby that night. And I started to change. I don't want this anymore. I don't want to go back to jail anymore. I don't want to live this kind of life where somebody's always banging on my door. But the real changes came really after I met my wife. We used to sit around and talk. And she would school me on things without letting me know. Like, this is wrong. And then when you have your own, when you have a woman, when you have a wife and you have children, you work hard for your things. You begin to realize how much you have hurt other people by breaking in their homes, invading their privacy. I mean, I used to do a lot of B&Es. And to think now, if somebody B&E'd my home, I would be so upset.
I want to know about that big first day back at school. You decide you're going to go back, get upgrading, get the high school diploma, and then you almost walk out.
It was frightening. There was nothing more frightening than being there that day in school. I was 30 years old. Most of the kids around me were 20. So, be honest with you, I felt out of place. I had trouble reading. I was fairly illiterate.
Yeah.
I had a lot of street smarts.
So you were 30 years old with about a grade 2 education.
Yep. I couldn't divide at all. I couldn't multiply very good. I could add. You couldn't cheat me out of I mean, I could do that, but I had no education. And education is an important thing, a skill, so you don't become exploit bait to the world. I need to be around people that are trying to do something with their lives. I need to reach out. I feel good when I'm reaching out now. Maybe that's how I'm paying back. Maybe I don't come out and say it. Maybe subliminally I do regret all the things I did. I can't turn that around. But I can maybe help turn other people's lives around.